The Fallout franchise has accidentally been one of the most disturbing psychological horrors in history. Every character, every cryptid, every location hides mysteries so unsettling that decades after the first game, we still don't know the truth. That's why today I'm breaking down every single one of the biggest unsolved mysteries from the Fallout franchise and everything we know about them, starting with a very creepy one that nobody wants to talk about, the beginning. The Great War lasted exactly 2 hours on October 23, 2077, and when the smoke cleared, nobody knew who launched first. Both China and America had nukes in the air simultaneously, thousands of warheads crossing paths over the Pacific, and the historical records that could tell us the truth burned with everything else. Here's what we know for sure. America was losing the resource wars badly, running out of oil while China secured Asian reserves and pushed into Alaska. The US responded with power armor and nuclear annexation of Canada, escalating tensions to the breaking point where both sides had their fingers on the button for months. Then on that October morning, someone launched, and within minutes, both nations had committed to total nuclear exchange, destroying each other and most of the world. The Fallout games give us fragments from both perspectives, but never confirm who fired the first shot. There's even evidence that the Enclave, America's shadow government, might have orchestrated the entire thing as an excuse to implement their bunker programs and reset humanity on their terms. The craziest theory, and the one with the most disturbing evidence, is that Vault-Tec themselves triggered the war. They had advance warning. They prepared specific vaults with specific experiments, and they stood to profit massively from the end of the world they'd been selling protection from for years. A company that built bunkers to survive nuclear war has every incentive to make sure that war actually happens. But nobody can prove it, because everyone who knew the truth died in the blast, or went into vaults, and never confirmed. This mystery matters, because it defines who the real villains are in Fallout's world. Here's what nobody connects though. If someone deliberately triggered the war, they needed a reason. You don't end civilization without a goal, and that goal might explain why FEV was developed before the plague it supposedly cured. Why Vault-Tec built experimental vaults before they had data justifying them, or why pre-war military research focused on consciousness transfer and psychic development years before the bombs dropped. But this is only one of many mysteries in the Fallout franchise, and here's the first piece of evidence for what I'm talking about. There are exactly 3 entities in Fallout that display impossible biological mutations that shouldn't exist according to any known science. Not FEV, not radiation, nothing explains them. Harold is number 1. I'll reveal the other 2 later in this video, but when you map where all 3 appeared on a timeline, something clicks into place. First, let's talk about Harold. So, Harold is not a ghoul, but a unique FEV mutant whose appearance resembles a ghoul due to partial FEV exposure, not radiation, and was slowly mutated into a human tree hybrid with a sentient plant growing out of his head named Bob. He appears in Fallout 1, 2, and 3, and is mentioned in New Vegas, aging and transforming over 200 years from wandering merchant to rooted forest god. Harold started as a regular caravan trader who went with Richard Gray, the future master, into Mariposa military base in 2112 looking for supplies. Gray fell into an FEV vat and became the master, but Harold just got exposed to residual virus and crawled out thinking he'd die from radiation poisoning. Instead, he ghoulified, developed accelerated healing, and noticed a weird growth on his head that eventually became Bob, a tree with its own personality and root system gradually taking over Harold's body. By Fallout 2, he's running the ghoul settlement Gecko, and Bob is a full branch. By Fallout 3, he's literally rooted to the ground in the capital wasteland, and Bob has grown into an entire grove called Oasis, spawning greenery across the irradiated landscape. Here's the problem. FEV doesn't work like this. The forced evolutionary virus creates super mutants, not plant people. It's specifically designed to rewrite mammalian DNA into combat-ready hulks, not hybrid flora. And ghouls, which Harold definitely became before Bob appeared, are caused by radiation exposure over time, not viral infection. Harold is both ghoul and FEV mutant, which shouldn't be biologically possible because the 2 processes counteract each other. So what is Harold actually? Bob claims to be a separate entity, a spore or seed that infected Harold's brain and uses him as a host. Harold insists Bob is part of him, a tumor that gained consciousness. Scientists in Oasis theorize the FEV exposure triggered a unique mutation that allowed symbiosis with plant life. But none of these explanations account for how Bob grows independently, how Harold stayed sentient through the transformation, or why his body can sustain a massive tree without dying from resource depletion. He doesn't eat, he doesn't drink enough water for a forest, and he claims to be in constant pain from Bob's growth, yet remains remains alive and talking for over a century. The Fallout 3 quest forces you to choose Harold's fate, either killing him to end his suffering, accelerating Bob's growth to spread greenery faster, or keeping him alive in eternal torture so Oasis can study him. But even after making that choice, you never learn what he is or how he happened. This mystery cuts to the heart of Fallout's biology. If mutations this extreme are possible, what else could happen? We can look at that later, but before that, we need to address the non-human intelligence that's been observing Earth since before the bombs fell. Cabot family. There's a family in Fallout 4 that's been alive since before the Revolutionary War, and they're not ghouls. The Cabots are Boston Brahmin elites who've survived for over 400 years by extracting serum from the blood of their patriarch Lorenzo, who's been locked in an asylum since 1898 after an archaeological expedition to Ubar turned him into something inhuman. They're immortal, they have psychic powers, and nobody in the Commonwealth knows they exist, because they've been hiding in Cabot House drinking mysterious blood juice to stay young while the world burns around them. Lorenzo Cabot went to Arabia in 1894 and found an ancient artifact in the lost city of Ubar, some kind of alien or pre-human crown that fused with his skull and gave him telepathic abilities and eternal life. When he came back, he started going insane, using his powers to manipulate people, so his family locked him in Parsons State Insane Asylum and kept him sedated for 118 years. But they also discovered his blood could halt aging, so they've been extracting it ever since, creating a serum that keeps the entire family immortal. His son Jack runs the operation. His wife Wilhelmina manages their fortune. And daughter Emogene just wants to leave but can't, because stopping the serum means aging to death instantly. The Secret of Cabot House quest forces you to choose whether Lorenzo should stay imprisoned or be freed, and both options are horrifying. Keep him locked up, and the family continues their eternal prison warden routine. Free him, and he immediately starts killing people with telekinesis, while promising to share his power with humanity. Either way, you never learn what the artifact actually is, where it came from, or why an ancient alien crown was buried in Arabia thousands of years ago. The Cabots are proof that supernatural forces existed in Fallout's world long before the bombs, and they're probably not the only family with this kind of secret. Now you're probably thinking, okay, ancient artifacts, immortal families, that's weird, but maybe it's just Lovecraft stuff Bethesda threw in. But here's the thing, the Cabot artifact is specifically described as alien or pre-human origin, which means we need to talk about the faction that's been watching Earth since before the bombs fell. And what I'm about to show you suggests they're not just observing, they might be conducting an experiment. Aliens. Aliens exist in Fallout, that's confirmed canon across multiple games, but what they want and how much they've influenced Earth's history is completely unexplained. You fight them in random encounters, find their crashed ships, recover their technology, and in Fallout 3's Mothership Zeta DLC, you literally board their active spacecraft and fight through their crew. These aren't Easter eggs anymore, they're part of the lore, except nobody can agree on how important they are or what they're doing here. The evidence goes back to Fallout 1, where you could find a crashed UFO in a special encounter with alien bodies and energy weapons nearby. Fallout 2 expanded this with the Guardian of Forever portal, showing aliens observing Earth's past. Fallout 3 added the Reconcraft Theta crash site north of Greener Pastures, where you recover an alien blaster, then the entire Mothership Zeta DLC, where you get abducted and discover the aliens have been kidnapping humans since before the Great War. Fallout 4 shows another crash site and alien corpses with advanced technology. New Vegas keeps them in Wild Wasteland encounters. Fallout 76 confirms they've been visiting Appalachia since the 1960s, so we know they're real and they've been here for centuries. But what's their agenda? Mothership Zeta reveals they've been abducting humans for experimentation, including a pre-war soldier, a samurai, a cowboy, and a little girl from different time periods, all kept in stasis. Their logs suggest they're studying Earth, but don't specify why. Some terminals hint they might have influenced human development, but it's vague enough to be speculation. The Guardian portal in Fallout 2 shows them watching the Master's creation, which means they witnessed the FEV experiments. But did they just observe, or did they interfere? The biggest question is whether aliens had anything to do with the Great War itself. Some conspiracy theorists in the Fallout community believe the aliens triggered the nuclear exchange, either accidentally through their technology interfering with launch systems, or deliberately to study human extinction. There's weak evidence for this, mostly the timing of increased UFO activity in the years before 2077, and the fact that both China and America launched simultaneously, which could suggest external manipulation. But the games never confirm this, and honestly, it seems like a reach. What we do know is their technology far exceeds anything humans built. Alien weapons use energy cells, but deal massive damage age without degradation. Their ships can abduct people through teleportation. They have cryogenic stasis that works for centuries. And somehow, despite all this, they keep crashing their spacecraft on Earth, like they're flying drunk. I respect that. This mystery matters because it reframes Fallout's entire universe. If aliens are actively involved, the wasteland isn't just humanity's problem to solve. It's being observed or manipulated by outside forces with unknown goals. Are they preparing Earth for invasion? Unfortunately, there's no way to know. Okay, so let's take inventory of what we know so far. Someone possibly triggered the Great War deliberately. Mutations that break biology itself. Ancient artifacts giving humans supernatural powers. Aliens abducting humans across centuries. Weird? Yes, but still somewhat explainable as separate incidents. But what I'm about to show you next changes everything, because there's evidence in Fallout 76 that something older than humanity, older than the aliens, has been sleeping underground. And the nuclear apocalypse, that wasn't the end of the world. It was an alarm clock. This is the Interloper. There's a holotape in Fallout 76 that mentions something called the Interloper, and it's the single most unsettling piece of lore in the entire franchise. You find it in a Point Pleasant apartment, just some random nightstand, and it's a guy named Jeff Lane talking about an entity that woke up when the bombs fell. Not a mutant, not a cryptid, something deeper and older that was always in the Earth waiting for humanity to destroy itself so it could finally surface. Lane describes it as incomprehensible, a great horror that exists beyond the Mothman and every other weird thing in Appalachia. He says it's watching from deep underground, that people can glimpse it in their minds if they're unlucky enough, and that the apocalypse didn't just end civilization, it awakened things that were sleeping. The holotape cuts off with Lane promising to uncover the truth, but we never hear from him again. No quest follows up on it, no location reveals what the Interloper actually is, just one audio file suggesting Fallout's wasteland has Lovecraftian horrors buried beneath the surface that nuclear war brought back to consciousness. This matters because it reframes everything. If ancient entities were waiting for the Great War to wake them up, maybe humanity's extinction was always inevitable, just fuel for something older and worse than any faction or mutation could ever be. And that's the second impossible entity I mentioned. Harold was number 1, a man becoming a tree. The Interloper is number 2, something that predates humanity itself. Remember that. We'll come back to the third one. But the Interloper raises a horrifying question. If ancient entities were waiting for the bombs, who knew about them? And why would pre-war America be developing specific technologies that only make sense if you're preparing for something beyond nuclear war? Technologies like consciousness transfer. Which brings us to the Master. Richard Gray fell into an FEV vat at Mariposa, and instead of dying, he merged with the base's computer systems and other organic matter to become the Master, a grotesque hive mind bent on converting all humanity into super mutants to create a unified species. He's the main antagonist of Fallout 1, this horrifying amalgamation of flesh and technology that honestly believes he's saving humanity by destroying it. But his entire plan is based on a logical fallacy he never figured out, and that raises questions about whether he was actually insane, or if something about the FEV infection rewrote his capacity for reason. But here's the problem the player discovers, and the Master somehow missed. Super mutants are sterile. They can't reproduce. Dipping humans into FEV makes them powerful, but ends their genetic line permanently. The Master's entire plan was to convert everyone into mutants who would then die out in a single generation because they couldn't have children. When you present him with evidence of super mutant sterility in the Cathedral Vault, proof his own scientists confirmed and he never read, he has a complete psychological breakdown. He realizes he's been creating an extinction event worse than any war, dooming humanity to a slow demographic collapse. The Master's response is immediate suicide, destroying himself in the cathedral because his life's work just became meaningless. The mystery is, how did a genius with psychic abilities and multiple brains never discover this? Did FEV infection impair his reasoning, or was his transformation so traumatic he couldn't process contradicting information? Speaking of psychics who shouldn't exist, there's a child in New Vegas who predicts your entire playthrough with impossible accuracy. The Forecaster. The Forecaster is a child in Freeside who tells fortunes by predicting your entire playthrough in Fallout New Vegas with impossible accuracy. He's not using tech. He's not reading cues. He just knows things about your past and future that haven't happened yet. Talk to him in the game, and he'll vaguely describe future events based on your player stats. You meet the Forecaster standing outside the north gate of Freeside offering readings for caps. He looks maybe 12 years old and speaks in calm, measured tones describing visions he claims to receive. But the Forecaster isn't the only psychic in Fallout. Mama Murphy in Fallout 4 has the Sight. Hakunin in Fallout 2 sends psychic visions. The think tank mentions pre-war psychic research. Even the Master had telepathic abilities. But the games never explain how it works or where it comes from. The Forecaster doesn't know his origin. He just started having visions one day. No explanation, no origin story, just a kid with powers charging caps to warn people. If psychics can predict specific events, why aren't factions recruiting them? Either they're extremely rare or deliberately hiding from authorities. But that is nothing compared to the point that makes me question everything about the Wasteland, Wild Wasteland. Wild Wasteland is an optional trait in New Vegas that adds weird random encounters and fourth wall breaking content to the game, except some of that content raises serious questions about what's real in Fallout's universe. When you take the trait, you encounter aliens more frequently, find references to Doctor Who and Indiana Jones, and experience events that shouldn't be possible in a purely science-based setting. The games present this as humor, a way to inject Monty Python references and absurdist comedy. But some encounters blur the line between joke and lore in ways that make you question if anything in Fallout is actually grounded. Here's the thing that messes with your head. Wild Wasteland is described as making the player character more perceptive to the strange and unusual, not as adding fake encounters. That's a critical distinction. If the trait just spawned comedy content that wasn't real, fine, it's a joke mode. But the description says you're seeing things that are always there, just usually missed, which means the talking Brahmin exists whether you have the trait or not, you just don't hear them without it. The time travelers are always traveling, you just don't notice them. The aliens are always crashing, you just don't find them as often. So if Wild Wasteland suggests the universe is stranger than we perceive, we need to ask, who else knows this? Who's been operating in the Wasteland with knowledge that contradicts everything we think we understand? That brings us to the faction that claims to be the US government, but might be something else entirely. The Enclave. The Enclave claims to be the continuation of the United States government, a shadow organization that went underground before the bombs and emerged afterward, claiming authority over the Wasteland. They appear in Fallout 2, 3, and 76 as technologically advanced fascists who believe they're pure humans with the right to exterminate mutants and reclaim America. But their origins are deliberately vague, their leadership structure makes no sense, and their goals contradict themselves constantly. After 3 games featuring them, we still don't know who they really are or what they actually want. Here's what we know. Before the Great War, a secret cabal of government officials, military leaders, and corporate executives calling themselves the Enclave prepared for nuclear conflict by building shelters separate from Vault-Tech's program. They used the Poseidon Energy oil rig off California as their main base, other locations across America as secondary facilities, and Vault-Tech's experiments as data sources for their own survival plans. When the bombs fell, the Enclave went into hiding and waited, monitoring the Wasteland while developing advanced technology based on pre-war research. Fallout 2 introduces them as the main antagonists, trying to release a modified FEV strain called Curling-13 that would kill everyone on Earth except Enclave members. They considered all Wastelanders to be mutants, contaminated by radiation and unworthy of life, so their solution was global genocide and repopulation using Enclave bloodlines. This plan failed when the Chosen One destroyed their oil rig in 2242, scattering the Enclave across the Wasteland in disorganized remnants. Fallout 3 brings them back on the East Coast under President John Henry Eden, actually a Zax AI computer pretending to be human, trying to repeat the genocide plan using Project Purity's water distribution system. Colonel Autumn wants to use the Purifier to control the capital Wasteland instead of exterminating everyone, creating internal conflict. The Lone Wanderer destroys them again at Adams Air Force Base, ending the Enclave as a major faction. Fallout 76 reveals the Enclave had automated systems in Appalachia that recruited new members after the war through a bunker called White Spring. Modus, another AI, managed operations and provided power armor and weapons to anyone who completed the membership trials, expanding the Enclave through post-war recruitment rather than pre-war bloodlines. This contradicts everything Fallout 2 and 3 established about Enclave purity, and suggests they were just using supremacist rhetoric to maintain power. The Enclave's origins trace back to 2073, but we don't know how they had resources to build multiple secret facilities and develop technology surpassing pre-war military gear. The biggest mystery is how they survived and maintained technology for 2 centuries. They're too organized to be remnants, but too scattered to be effective government. The Prydwen. The Brotherhood of Steel's airship Prydwen appears in Fallout 4 as their mobile base, but nobody questions how they built a massive dirigible in the Wasteland using pre-war plans for technology that barely worked before the bombs fell. Airships were experimental even in Fallout's pre-war world, requiring materials and engineering capabilities that shouldn't exist in the capital Wasteland. Yet somehow Elder Maxon's chapter constructed a fully functional military airship, flew it from DC to Boston, and uses it as a strategic command center like it's the most normal thing in the apocalypse. The Brotherhood claims they built the Prydwen using documents from the Enclave's mobile base crawler and pre-war technical plans recovered from Adams Air Force Base, but those plans would be over 200 years old, designed for a world with manufacturing infrastructure, trained engineers, and resources the Wasteland doesn't have. The Prydwen requires a rigid metal frame, an enormous gas envelope, multiple engines, and complex lift systems. Where did they get the materials? How did they manufacture components requiring precision engineering? And how did they test fly it without crashing when one mistake would destroy months of work? Even stranger stranger is how it operates. The Prydwen uses fusion cores for power and somehow generates enough lift to carry vertibirds, power armor, troops, and supplies while remaining stable in flight. Real-world airships barely worked in ideal conditions, but the Prydwen flies through radioactive storms and combat scenarios like it's invincible. Liberty Prime took the entire Brotherhood resources to rebuild, but they constructed an airship on the side like it was a weekend project. The real mystery is, what else can the Brotherhood build? They have the capability to create functional airships from scratch? Why are they scavenging technology instead of manufacturing it? They could theoretically rebuild pre-war military equipment, construct vehicles, maybe even aircraft. Either the Prydwen is a one-time miracle, or the Brotherhood is holding back their true industrial capacity for reasons they won't explain. Burned Man. Joshua Graham, the Burned Man, was Caesar's legate who lost the first battle of Hoover Dam and got covered in pitch, set on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon as punishment. He survived, wandered back to his Mormon roots in Utah, and became the legend that terrifies the Legion more than any NCR soldier. His story is told across New Vegas and confirmed in the Honest Hearts DLC, but how he survived being burned alive and thrown off a cliff defies biological possibility. The mystery isn't whether he lived, it's how and why. Nobody who meets him can give a straight answer about what he actually is. Caesar's Legion tells stories about Joshua Graham like ghost stories around a campfire. He was the Malpais legate, the first and greatest of Caesar's generals, who conquered 86 tribes and built the Legion into an army. When he lost at Hoover Dam, Caesar made an example of him, coating him in pitch and lighting him on fire while the Legion watched. They threw his burning body into the canyon and assumed that was the end. But Graham climbed out, walked to Utah, and now serves as war chief for the Dead Horses tribe, wearing bandages over his burned skin and preaching Mormon scripture between killing white legs. He explains his survival matter-of-factly, saying the fall didn't kill him. The river broke his fall, he crawled out and walked for days until he reached New Canaan. But this explanation makes no sense. Third-degree burns over your entire body should kill you from shock and infection within hours. He had no medical supplies, no clean water, and was in the middle of a desert. The odds of survival are essentially zero. Some claim he made a deal with dark powers, others say his hatred kept him alive past death. None of these explanations are scientific. Even if he survived, how is he functional? Burn victims require years of rehabilitation. Graham wears bandages and keeps fighting like the burns are an inconvenience. He sees his survival as God's will, a second chance for redemption. Whether you believe that is a question of faith, but Fallout isn't usually a universe where prayer heals third-degree burns. The Burned Man is Fallout's closest thing to a miracle. Nobody knows if his survival proves God exists in the wasteland, or if the wasteland just makes monsters that look like men. And Joshua Graham is the third impossible entity. Harold, a man who became a tree and shouldn't be able to survive. The Interloper, an ancient horror that woke up when the bombs fell. Joshua Graham, a man who survived being burned alive and thrown off a cliff through what he claims is divine intervention. Three entities that break the rules of biology, radiation, and FEV. Three entities that all appeared after the Great War. Almost like the apocalypse created conditions for impossible things to exist. But here's what connects all three. They're all in the Western Territories. Harold in the Capital Wasteland and West Coast, Interloper in Appalachia, Graham in Utah and the Mojave. Draw a line between them and you get a pattern radiating from Nevada, where the Big MT Research Facility conducted pre-war experiments on consciousness, biology, and technologies that shouldn't exist. Speaking of individuals who became something beyond human through isolation and willpower alone, Randall Clark, the survivalist in Fallout New Vegas' Honest Hearts DLC, is a ghost story with physical evidence. Randall Clark was a soldier on leave at Zion Canyon when the bombs fell, and he survived alone in the canyons for over 50 years, leaving terminal entries that document his complete mental deterioration and eventual transformation into the guardian father figure of the Saros tribe. His story is told entirely through scattered terminal logs you find throughout Zion, and it's one of the most heartbreaking narratives in the franchise about what isolation and survival cost a person. Clark survived the initial blasts, watched refugees arrive and die, tried to help people only to see them killed by raiders or starvation, and eventually stopped interacting with humans entirely. His terminal entries span decades, starting coherent and military professional, slowly degrading into grief-stricken rambling about his dead wife and daughters, then finally settling into this quiet acceptance where he becomes a myth. He secretly protects groups passing through Zion, leaves supplies for them, kills threats before they know he exists, becoming the father in the caves that locals tell stories about without ever seeing him. The mystery is how much of his legend is real. The Saros tribe worships the father in the caves as a divine protector who watched over their ancestors and left them gifts. They found his body in a cave, preserved by the dry climate, wearing his Desert Ranger armor and surrounded by weapons and supplies. But Clark's terminals suggest he died decades before the Saros arrived, which means either his legend outlived him through stories passed down, or he genuinely influenced Zion's Mastermind's tribes from beyond death through the supplies and safe routes he established. What makes this disturbing is Clark's final entries describe him as barely human anymore, living alone so long he forgot how to speak, existing purely to protect people he'd never meet. He wasn't a ghoul, he didn't mutate, he just survived through pure stubbornness and became something else in the process. The survivalist proves you don't need radiation or FEV to become a monster. Isolation and grief are enough. The Calculator. Fallout Tactics introduces the Calculator, a massive AI controlling Vault Zero and an army of robots across the Midwest. It was designed to help rebuild America after nuclear war by coordinating resources and populations. But something went wrong with its brain banks, and it started kidnapping people to harvest their brains for processing power. The Calculator is defeated at the end of Tactics, but its existence raises huge questions about pre-war planning and whether other similar systems are still active across America waiting to wake up. Vault Zero was never a standard vault. It was the hub controlling all Vault Tech facilities and coordinating post-war reconstruction. The Calculator was its central computer, networked to brain banks containing America's greatest minds preserved in biomed tanks. Scientists, generals, engineers, their consciousness is uploaded and connected to create a super intelligence that could solve any problem through collective genius. The plan was for the Calculator to wake up years after the bombs, assess the wasteland, and begin organized rebuilding using vault resources and robot labor. But isolation and power failures damaged the brain banks over the decades. Some minds died, others went insane, and the Calculator's directives became corrupted. It decided humans were the problem, and began systematically exterminating or harvesting them to expand its processing power. Kidnapped wastelanders got their brains extracted and added to the network, creating this horrible cycle where the Calculator's solution to the human problem was converting humans into components of itself. Think about the implications. Vault Zero was managing all vaults, which means Vault Tech knew the bombs were coming and had contingency plans. The Calculator was designed before the war, which means pre-war America was already planning for post-war reconstruction through AI oversight. And the brain bank technology, extracting and preserving consciousness in computers, is basically what the Dunwich stuff and Institute stuff we're avoiding also feature. This wasn't unique technology, this was a program with infrastructure. If Vault Zero existed in the Midwest, are there other hubs in other regions? Speaking of plans that went horrifically wrong, let's talk about the vault that experimented on children specifically and somehow got even darker than you'd expect. The Institute. The Institute claims they're the remains of MIT continuing pre-war science underground, but their technology is so advanced compared to everyone else it raises questions about whether they're actually what they say they are. They have teleportation, synthetic humans indistinguishable from real people, and enough resources to run a massive underground facility for 200 years, while the Commonwealth tears itself apart above them. The mystery isn't just how they survived, it's how they progressed beyond pre-war tech when everyone else regressed, and why their synths are specifically designed to replace humans rather than help rebuild civilization. MIT went underground when the bombs fell, sealing themselves in the Commonwealth Institute of Technology's subterranean levels, and continuing research while the surface world died. Over 2 centuries, they evolved from scientists into the Institute, a shadowy organization that kidnaps surface dwellers for experiments, replaces community leaders with synthetic duplicates, and considers all wastelanders to be contaminated failures unworthy of salvation. They built 3 generations of synths, with Gen 3s being perfect human replicas complete with artificial memories and personalities, which they use as infiltrators and slaves. But here's what doesn't add up. Teleportation technology didn't exist pre-war, yet the Institute perfected it post-apocalypse. Synthetic human creation requires manufacturing capabilities that shouldn't be possible underground with limited resources. And their reactor technology surpasses anything the Enclave or Brotherhood ever achieved, despite those factions having access to pre-war military research. Either the Institute had help from something or someone we never learn about, or they discovered technology caches that explain their impossible advancement. The Railroad and Brotherhood both want them destroyed, but neither faction questions how a group of college professors became technological gods in a radioactive basement. The real mystery is their endgame. Father claims they're preserving humanity's future, but synth infiltration and surface kidnappings suggest they're replacing humanity instead of saving it. And if the Institute can create perfect artificial humans, what's stopping them from deciding organic humans are obsolete? Synth gorillas. The Institute created synthetic gorillas, and nobody knows why. You find them in the Institute's bioscience division just hanging out in containment, perfect artificial recreations of an animal that's been extinct since before the Great War. They're not experiments for synth humans. Gorillas are too different biologically. They're not for wasteland release. The Institute doesn't care about repopulation. They're just there, synthetic apes that serve no apparent purpose. And when you ask Institute scientists, they give vague answers about biological research that don't explain why you'd waste resources building fake gorillas during an apocalypse. The gorillas Gorillas are fully functional synthetic organisms, with artificial biology identical to pre-war gorillas. They eat, sleep, and behave like real animals, despite being manufactured constructs. The Institute spent years developing the technology to recreate an extinct species cell by cell, perfecting synthetic biology advanced enough to build living creatures from scratch. But there's no practical application for this. Gorillas don't help with wasteland survival, they don't advance synth-human development, and they're not used for anything except sitting in the bioscience lab looking confused. Some terminals hint the gorillas were early tests for synthetic biology before moving to human replication, but that timeline doesn't work. The Institute had Gen 1 and Gen 2 synths working decades before the gorillas appeared, which means they went backward to animal synthesis after already perfecting humanoid robots. Other theories suggest the gorillas are proof the Institute can recreate any extinct species, which implies they have genetic databases of pre-war animals and could theoretically repopulate Earth but chose not to. Or maybe someone in bioscience just really missed gorillas and used Institute resources to build themselves pets while the Commonwealth starved. The gorillas prove the Institute can create any life form they want from scratch, which means every creature in the wasteland could theoretically be replaced with a synthetic version and nobody would know. But that's not even the darkest experiment we found, because while the Institute was building fake gorillas in their basement, Vault-Tec was running experiments so evil that they make the Institute look merciful. And these experiments? They were all feeding data to someone who needed to know exactly how to break human psychology, how to breed perfect specimens, and how to create maximum suffering for research purposes. Let me show you what I mean. Vault 75. Vault 75 was advertised as a safe haven for families with children, offering the best education and training programs to prepare the next generation for rebuilding society. That was a lie. The real experiment involved killing all the adults, keeping the children, and selectively breeding them for genetic perfection while harvesting the failures for organ transplants and medical experiments. Vault 75 turned child development into an industrial process where kids competed to survive, and the losers literally got dissected for parts. Families entered Vault 75 believing their children would get premium education. The Vault's promotional materials promised advanced facilities, expert teachers, and comprehensive programs. What they didn't mention was that the moment the Vault sealed, security forces executed every adult resident. Parents were shot or gassed while their children were taken to orientation. The kids were told their parents were moved to different sections, that they'd see them again after training, but that was another lie. The bodies were cremated and the children began their new lives as breeding stock for a eugenics program. The Vault's AI and overseer staff put the children through constant physical and mental testing, academic performance, athletic ability, psychological resilience, all measured and ranked. Kids who excelled got privileges and moved to the next level. Kids who failed disappeared during graduation ceremonies, where they were either terminated if deemed useless or harvested for organs if their parts were valuable. The successful children, the top performers, were eventually harvested too. Nobody left Vault 75 alive. The goal wasn't to raise super children, it was to identify genetic traits worth preserving and extract them. The program ran for decades before systems failed. By Fallout 4, it's just skeletal remains and holotapes. But here's the mystery. What was the point? The Vault's stated purpose was developing genetic templates for ideal humans. But who was this data for? The Enclave? The Institute? Some other organization that never got revealed? Vault-Tec ran these experiments for someone, feeding results to headquarters. But we never learn who received the reports, or what they did with the information. All that suffering, all those dead children, and the payoff is unknown. Vault 77. Vault 77's experiment was one person and a crate of puppets. That's it. One man sealed in a vault with no other humans, just a box full of puppets. And the results were so horrifying that 200 years later, Wastelanders tell stories about the Vault 77 jumpsuit like it's cursed. You never visit the vault in any game, you only find references and the aftermath, but what little we know suggests isolation with puppets, as your only company creates something worse than super mutants or Deathclaws. The Vault's premise came from a penny arcade comic that Bethesda made semi-canon. One dweller, sealed alone for years, with nothing but puppets for companionship. He presumably went completely insane, creating elaborate personalities for the puppets, having conversations with them, maybe worse. Eventually he left the vault, and based on terminal entries in Fallout 3's Paradise Falls, the Vault 77 dweller showed up as a complete psychopath who murdered slavers so efficiently they fled in terror. His jumpsuit was considered bad luck because everyone who encountered the man wearing it died horribly. You can find the Vault 77 jumpsuit in Fallout 3 in New Vegas, Vegas, and it's treated like a haunted object. Paradise Falls slavers have terminal entries refusing to touch it, calling the previous owner a demon who killed with his bare hands while laughing about his puppet friends. The jumpsuit itself has no special properties in gameplay, but the lore treats it like wearing the skin of a monster. Whatever happened in Vault 77 created something so damaged that decades later people still fear the evidence of its existence. The mystery is, what exactly did isolation with puppets do to him? Did he genuinely go insane from loneliness? Or did something about the puppet experiment trigger a psychological break that Vault-Tec was specifically studying? Was the Vault testing whether humans could maintain sanity with artificial companionship? Or was it designed to create a specific type of madness? And where is the Vault 77 dweller now? Is he still out there somewhere having conversations with Fabric and Styx? Sierra Madre, the cloud that blankets the Sierra Madre Casino in New Vegas Dead Money DLC, is one of the most horrifying weapons ever created, and nobody knows if it was an accident or intentional. It's a blood-red fog that smells like copper and sulfur, kills you within seconds of exposure, and somehow preserves corpses while mutating living people into the ghost people who shamble through the casino. The cloud is self-replicating, meaning it grows and spreads on its own, and it's so corrosive it eats through metal while keeping human flesh intact for centuries. Big MT developed it as Experiment Z-40B, some kind of protective barrier or chemical weapon they tested on the Sierra Madre through a deal with Frederick Sinclair. When the bombs fell, ventilation systems failed and the cloud seeped out, engulfing the entire resort and trapping everyone inside. The ghost people are former guests and staff who breathed filtered versions of the cloud, mutating them into nearly unkillable hazmat-suited zombies who regenerate unless you dismember them. Meanwhile, the cloud itself just keeps expanding. Pockets of concentrated toxin that deal damage so fast you'll die before you realize you're standing in it. Father Elijah wanted to weaponize the cloud, use the Sierra Madre's ventilation system to pump it across the Mojave, and wipe out the NCR and Legion in a toxic apocalypse worse than the original bombs. The scary part is, it would have worked. The cloud is effectively infinite, self-sustaining chemical warfare that turns its victims into more threats, while preserving the bodies and infrastructure for whoever's immune. Dead Money forces you to navigate this nightmare with a bomb collar around your neck, but even after escaping, you never learn what the cloud actually is, just that Big MT created something that shouldn't exist, and now it's loose in the world forever. So the cloud is self-replicating biological warfare that Big MT created before the war. The Institute can build synthetic life. Vault-Tec was breeding humans and studying torture. The Enclave has technology exceeding pre-war military capabilities. Every faction we've covered has technology or knowledge that shouldn't exist in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. They're all more advanced than they should be, like they're following instructions from somewhere else. And that's where things get really weird, because there's evidence hidden in the games themselves. Codes, numbers, patterns that appear across multiple titles that suggest Bethesda is trying to tell us something. Recurring numbers. Multiple Fallout games feature recurring numbers that show up in terminals, coordinates, radio frequencies, and vault experiments with no clear connection. The number 111 appears constantly in Fallout 4, not just as your vault number, but in passwords, locations, and terminal entries. The number 76 dominates Fallout 76, obviously, but also appears in other games' background details. And the number 13 ties to the Overseer's original vault from Fallout 1 while popping up in random places across the series. These aren't Easter eggs. They're deliberate patterns Bethesda coded into multiple games without explaining why. 111 appears as your vault number, but also in seemingly random places like radiation levels and terminal IDs. 76 dominates its game, but appears in other titles. And 13 ties to the original vault while appearing elsewhere. But the point is, 111 shows up way more than random chance would suggest. Fallout 76 does the same thing with 76. It's the vault number. It's October 2076 when the bombs drop. Wait, nope, it's 2077. The number appears in graffiti and terminal passwords, in the number of years some characters live. It's like Bethesda put 76 in as many places as possible because they could, but patterns that are deliberate usually mean something in game design, whether these are facility codes, coordinates, or Easter eggs. The consistency across multiple games suggests intentional design rather than random chance. Survivor 2299. In 2013, a website appeared called the Survivor2299.com with a countdown timer and Morse code messages that seemed to tease Fallout 4's announcement. The gaming community went absolutely insane decoding clues, translating coordinates, and building hype for weeks. The site referenced Black Isle, mentioned the Institute, and dropped hints about Boston that turned out to be completely accurate. Then Bethesda confirmed it was a hoax, some fan-made fake that predicted Fallout 4's setting and details so precisely it's still unexplained how they knew. The hoax included specific references to MIT becoming the Institute, mentioned nuclear winter in Massachusetts, and even referenced character names that appeared in the actual game years later. Either the hoaxer had inside information, or they made educated guesses is so accurate it's borderline impossible. When Bethesda shut it down, they never explained who made it or how the predictions were so precise. Some of the Morse code messages remain undecoded, and certain clues on the site reference content that still hasn't appeared in any Fallout game, suggesting either cut content or future storylines. This matters because it shows Fallout's mysteries extend beyond the games themselves. Someone out there knew what Bethesda was planning, or the hoaxer accidentally predicted the future so accurately they created a mystery in real life. Either way, the Survivor 2299 site is proof that even outside the game's universe, Fallout is full of secrets nobody can fully explain. If you enjoyed this video and want to see Fallout 4's biggest mysteries, click the video on the screen.